The monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, cold as a ticking countdown. 9-year-old Naomi lay motionless beneath a blanket patterned with butterflies. Plastic tubes coiled around her fragile body like invisible chains. A doctor's voice cut through the room, blunt and final. "It's time to pull the plug." Daniel collapsed beside her bed, calloused hands clutching his daughter's small palm. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, fought to hold back tears. At that instant, the wall clock flickered, its red light pulsing strangely in the silence. From the weight pressing down on his chest, a hoarse sound escaped the father's throat. Harsh white light from fluorescent bulbs spilled across the cold room. A father's shadow bent low beside his daughter's bed, his breath wrapped in the sharp sting of disinfectant. On the wall, a digital clock flickered an unbending number, its red glow pulsing strangely. Each blink cut like a steady blade into hope already worn thin. 9-year-old Naomi Reeves lay motionless beneath a butterfly-patterned blanket. Her face was pale, her curls tangled against the pillow. Plastic tubes clung to her petite frame, like lifeless roots holding her down. Each beep of the monitor sounded like a dry sigh, unchanging, stalled in an endless stretch of despair. Daniel Reeves sat close, his rough hands locked around her tiny fingers. He was a man who once built bridges, poured concrete, and steered massive cranes. Yet here he was, powerless, clinging to the faint hope of a finger's twitch. His back hunched, his eyes raw and rimmed red, beard grown uneven. No worksite had ever broken him, but this white hospital bed had. The door swung open. Victor Harlow entered, tall frame wrapped in a light gray coat, sunglasses hooked on his pocket like a badge. Two bodyguards and an assistant with a clipboard followed. The overhead lights bounced off his polished face like steel. Harlow glanced at Naomi for barely a second before turning to the doctors. "I've brought the latest equipment," he declared. "We'll upgrade her brain like upgrading a car." Cameras flashed in the hall. Reporters jostled to catch every move. News of this awakening technology had spread widely, turning room 317 into a stage. Daniel's brow tightened. His grip on Naomi's hand deepened, veins bulging in his scarred arm. Nurses wheeled in machines, wires dangling like iron tentacles. Cold green numbers danced across a screen. Harlow crossed his arms, lips curling in a confident half smile. "You'll see her open her eyes any moment now," he promised, his voice echoing with winter's chill. But Naomi stayed still. Only the steady hiss of the ventilator filled the air. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Sweat dripped from the doctor's forehead to the tile. A cough broke the silence. Camera flashes faded. Harlow's jaw tightened. He motioned for a new device. This time, a virtual reality helmet was lowered over Naomi's fragile face. A dark shadow smothered her features. Daniel surged forward, knocking the helmet aside. "She's not a machine for your experiments," he said, voice trembling with anger. Every gaze turned to him. Silence froze the room. From the corner, a young nurse named Marissa stepped forward, gently touching Daniel's shoulder. Her eyes glistened as if to say, "You're not alone." Harlow let out a metallic laugh, shaking his head. "Emotion makes you weak. Science wins." He snapped his fingers for more equipment, but Daniel sat back down, pressing his daughter's hand under the butterfly blanket, his eyes blazing. "She needs love, not a spectacle." The wall clock flickered again, its red glow sharp and irregular. The light spilled across Naomi's sleeping face. Marissa inhaled hard and whispered just loud enough for Daniel. "Look, something's off with that time." Daniel froze. It felt like a warning carved into the air, a moment that would return. Outside, cameras powered down, and reporters drifted away. Inside, Harlow, frustrated, ordered the machines cleared. He left behind only the acrid trace of expensive cologne in the chilled air. Daniel closed his eyes, leaned close, and whispered to his daughter, "I won't let anyone treat you like a test subject again." His voice cracked, but his grip stayed firm. In the hallway, neon lights flickered, then cut out for a single second. Darkness pressed in. When the glow returned, Daniel's heart pounded. Something, he couldn't name it, waited beyond that door. The hallway lights flickered back to life as Daniel stepped into the room. The air felt frozen, broken only by the relentless beeping of the monitor. He sat down, shoulders heavy, his hand trembling as he brushed back his daughter's tangled curls. The thin blanket offered no warmth, yet he pulled it up to Naomi's chin, as if sheer will could shield her. He drew a deep breath and began to sing. His voice was hoarse, breaking in places, but it carried the fragile warmth of a small fire in winter. It was the lullaby he once sang for his wife and child. Memories rushed in, when there were three of them, when laughter filled the house. The smell of cooking smoke, the glow of yellow light, the coconut oil scent in his wife's hair. All of it now lived only in memory. Naomi remained still, but the monitor flickered. The line trembled, then steadied. Daniel's eyes lifted, his heart skipping. "Can you hear me?" he whispered, gripping her tiny hand tighter. A bead of sweat slid from his brow onto her skin. Marissa, the nurse scribbling in the corner, looked up, frowning, her eyes bright as if she'd noticed something unusual. The door opened. An older doctor stepped in, glanced at the screen and smirked. "It's just interference. Don't fool yourself." His words cut like a cold blade. Daniel's face burned, but he stayed silent. He turned back to Naomi, murmuring, "I know you can hear me." Marissa drew in a breath, but said nothing. A group of staff walked past, catching the sound of his fractured song. One muttered, "Does he think he's a doctor?" Laughter echoed down the corridor, sharp as needles in Daniel's chest. He rose, eyes blazing. "I'm singing to my daughter. I'm not hurting anyone." His protest was sliced short by the shift supervisor. "Keep quiet. This isn't a place for displays of emotion." Daniel bit hard into his lip, swallowing his words. His dignity, already fragile, was struck down in plain sight. Marissa stepped forward, setting a water bottle on the table, her glance carrying silent comfort. A faint seed of hope flickered in his weary eyes. Yet the whispers around him smothered it before it could grow. The wall clock ticked stiffly in the thick night air. Each minute dragged, heavy as stones dropping into his chest. Daniel kept singing, voice cracking, shoulders shaking with exhaustion. The monitor suddenly spiked, the line rising, then fading again. Marissa froze, clutching her notebook. She longed to mark the time, but feared being dismissed as superstitious. Inside, she knew she had just witnessed something beyond explanation. The air grew harsher, reeking of disinfectant. Daniel bent close and whispered words he'd never said aloud. "I'm sorry. I wasn't there when you fell. I missed our last breakfast together." His voice splintered, each word heavy as stone. For the first time, he let his regrets spill free, just as Naomi's finger twitched beneath the blanket. The monitor beeped twice, quick and sharp, then slowed again. Marissa's pen slipped from her hand, clattering across the tile. She glanced at the clock. The minute hand had jumped, its cold glow flashing against the glass. Proof stood before her, undeniable. Yet the doctor, already walking out, tossed back a cold dismissal. "Don't believe in illusions." The door slammed, leaving silence thick behind him. Daniel lowered his head onto Naomi's hand, a single tear soaking into the fabric. Outside the window, a streetlight flared, then went dark in a single blink. The glass filled with shadow, father and daughter blurred into one silhouette. Daniel didn't notice, but Marissa shivered. Inside her, something stirred. Fear and awe mingled, as if an unseen hand had brushed the room. Daniel drew a shaky breath and whispered again, voice raw, "Come back to me." Daniel's voice still trembled in the room when the light outside the window blinked out. Darkness swept across for a brief beat, then returned. He dropped heavily into the chair, his hand locked to Naomi's, slick with sweat. Inside his chest, his heartbeat pounded like drums calling a storm. A soft knock came at the door. Marissa peeked in, her eyes uncertain. "Mr. Reeves, there's a boy in the waiting area. He says he wants to see you." Daniel stiffened. At this late hour, what child would be in a hospital? He rose, his steps heavy as chains, and walked down the long hallway, washed in pale yellow light. On a cold bench sat a boy, curled against himself. His bare feet were cracked, his thin body swallowed in an oversized coat. Curls matted against his forehead. His eyes were steady, dark as night water. As Daniel approached, the boy lifted his head and gave a slight nod. "You're Naomi's father?" His voice was soft, yet every word was clear. "Yes. Who are you?" Daniel asked, wary. The boy didn't answer directly. "I know how to call her back." The words fell sharp, slicing the air. Marissa froze beside him, breath caught in her throat. At the reception desk, the guest log sat blank. No name written, no record he had ever entered. A guard approached, frowning. "Where'd this kid come from? He's not on camera, not in the log. Must have wandered in." He reached to grab the boy, but Daniel stopped him. "Wait, he's just a child." His voice was hoarse but firm, a scrap of dignity he refused to surrender. The guard sneered. "You're going to trust a homeless kid's word?" The boy sat unmoving, eyes unblinking. His calm presence hushed the hallway. Daniel's hand faltered. He saw in that gaze a reflection of his daughter when she was well. Marissa set her coffee on the counter, the soft clink echoing far. Her glance met Daniel's, a quiet anchor of belief. The guard snapped, "If he doesn't leave, I'll call the supervisor." Marissa stepped forward quickly. "I'll take responsibility. He's not causing trouble." For a moment, she crossed her own boundary, her voice shaking but sure. Daniel looked at her, startled as her eyes glowed like a small lantern in the dark. The wall clock clicked, its minute hand dragging forward, steady as a heartbeat. Daniel swallowed hard, leaning down. "What do you want from me?" The boy answered slowly. "Just a chance to sit beside her. If I'm wrong, I'll go." His tone was calm, final, without begging. Daniel glanced from the guard to Marissa. Overhead, the fluorescent light flickered, flared, then cut out for a single second. His chest tightened. Another sign. He drew a long breath and nodded. "All right," but only for a moment. The boy stood, bare feet pressed against the cold tile without flinching. He walked straight toward the hospital room, each step deliberate, carrying an odd dignity. Marissa followed, clutching her notebook. The guard lingered, scowling, arms crossed. Daniel opened the door, his heartbeat racing, heat rising in his chest as if it might burst. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The boy stopped at the threshold, turning back. His dark eyes met Daniel's without wavering. "Micah," he said, "and I'm asking permission to enter." Micah stood at the threshold, his bare feet leaving smudges on the white tile. He turned, locking eyes with Daniel. "If you want her to return, you must speak what you've never dared to say." His voice wasn't loud, yet it rang clear as a bell in the silent room. Daniel staggered, gripping the bedrail. His breath grew heavy, chest tight. Marissa clutched her notebook, caught between belief and doubt. The monitor beeped steadily, its green glow brushing across Naomi's face. The wall clock ticked forward, each beat striking like a hammer against her father's ribs. Outside, a few staff paused to peek in. A young doctor scoffed. "Now he's trusting a homeless kid?" Harsh laughter followed. Daniel's face flushed, but he didn't look back. He bent low, calloused hands trembling as they held his daughter's. "I'm sorry." The words scraped through clenched teeth, thick with pain. The sharp bite of antiseptic mixed with the salt of sweat. Daniel bent lower, tears falling onto the pillow. "I wasn't there when you fell. I missed our last breakfast together." His voice cracked apart, every word dropping like stone. The monitor flickered, the line spiking high, then collapsing. The room gasped. Marissa pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. She scribbled frantically. "Abnormal signal. I saw it with my own eyes. Abnormal signal." Her hand shook so badly the ink smeared. For a heartbeat, she felt like the only witness to a miracle. But an older doctor's voice barked from the hall. "It's electrical noise. Stop writing nonsense." Daniel didn't hear. His voice poured out, broken. "I buried everything after your mother died. I forgot to sing, to tell stories, to listen." His breath came ragged, like a man collapsing in the desert. A sob tore loose, shaking his whole frame. And then, Naomi's finger twitched beneath the butterfly blanket. Marissa gasped, her pen clattering to the tile, echoing through the room. Every eye turned to the bed. Daniel lifted his head, tears streaming. "Can you hear me? Please, forgive me." His confession burst out like fire, burning away the armor he had worn. The monitor raced, beeping faster. A doctor rushed in, clutching a clipboard. If this keeps spiking, we need to prep for transfer. Footsteps pounded like a ticking countdown. Daniel gripped his daughter's hand tighter, slick with cold sweat. His lips trembled, forcing out the unfinished plea. Naomi, if you're still there. Daniel stayed bent over the bed, lips trembling, his hand gripping Naomi's with desperate strength. His unfinished call to her hung in the air. No reply came, only the steady beep of the monitor, sharp as a blade cutting his heart. A doctor shook his head. Colleagues scribbled notes. A few sighed with weary pity. Daniel's face went pale, as if he'd been hurled into a bottomless pit. Outside, the first light of morning slipped through the window, thin yet cold. Daniel sat still, shoulders slumped, lips moving without sound. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless. Even his tears dried stiff in the corners of his eyes. Yet his calloused hand still shielded her small one, the last thread keeping him from breaking apart. The door opened. Micah stood there again, bare feet dusty, his calm presence unfazed by the stares. He didn't rush in. He simply stood, eyes glowing in the dim light. "You've spoken the truth," he said softly. "Now only one thing is missing." Daniel looked up, drained. "What?" the boy whispered. "The lullaby your grandmother once sang to you." The room froze. Daniel's heart lurched, struck at an old scar. That lullaby, he'd never shared it with anyone, never sung it since his wife's death. How do you know?" he choked, staring at Micah like a riddle without an answer. The boy didn't respond. He rested his thin hand on the bed rail and bowed his head. "Naomi remembers, but she needs to hear it from you." The wall clock ticked forward, its digits glowing red in tense silence. A doctor stepped closer, eyes narrowed, half sneering. "You plan to sing now? We'll record it, use it later as evidence of your state of mind." He motioned for a nurse to set up the brainwave monitor. Marissa, standing near, clutched her notebook and gave Daniel a slight nod. Her eyes carried the message, "Do it." Daniel swallowed hard, chest burning. He straightened, drew a breath, eyes brimming. His voice cracked, but the words fell like long-awaited rain striking a roof. "There's a light within the dark. There's a star within the rain." The air seemed to vibrate. The doctor froze, staring at the monitor where Naomi's brainwaves flickered in strange new patterns. Naomi lay still, but her eyelids trembled, fragile as a leaf in the wind. Marissa covered her mouth with one hand, jotting quickly. Brainwave change, undeniable. Daniel's vision blurred, but he kept singing, "Hold my hand, little dream, and you'll find your way home." His voice quivered like a thread ready to snap, yet he poured in every ounce of strength. Suddenly, the heart monitor beeped faster, green lights flashing in rapid bursts. The room held its breath. Daniel broke off mid-line, his hand clutching hers with trembling urgency. "Naomi, if you can hear me." Daniel stayed close to the bed, his song cut short. The air grew heavy, filled only with the pounding beeps of the monitor. He bent low, whispering to his daughter, his heart weighed with both hope and fear. Just then, Marissa moved to the window to draw the curtain. Her hand brushed against a small slip of paper stuck to the glass. The note was old, written in hurried strokes like a nurse had left it behind. "The moment the clock flickers, the red light pulses, don't give up." Her heart jolted, eyes wide. That was the exact moment the wall clock had glowed strangely. Hands trembling, Marissa handed the paper to Daniel in front of the others. "How long has this been here?" a doctor muttered, suspicion in his voice. Daniel held it, his rough fingers tracing the edge as though it were sacred. To him, those words were a lifeline in this sterile room of machines. Murmurs rippled through the hall. A few doctors shook their heads. "Someone's prank," they whispered. But Daniel wouldn't let go. He raised the note high, eyes burning. "This proves she's still waiting. I won't let anyone stop us." The room froze. It was a declaration, public and final. No way back. The wall clock dragged forward, each minute thick and suffocating, ticking like a countdown. The shift supervisor stepped in, his voice calm but unyielding. "Mr. Reeves, this case must end. Don't turn this hospital into superstition." His words dropped heavily, cornering Daniel. Sweat soaked his collar as he stood guard by Naomi's bed. Micah leaned quietly against the wall, his dark eyes steady, bare feet rooted to the cold floor. He said nothing, only gave a slight nod, but it was enough to steel Daniel's resolve. He turned back, his voice rough but firm. "If needed, I'll sign every form. But Naomi will not be abandoned." His words rang out, trembling but clear, like a bell struck in a storm. The monitor suddenly flashed, its waves spiking wildly. A doctor bent close, sweat shining on his brow. "Impossible. Her brain signals are more stable than before." The room erupted, skeptics on one side, believers on the other. Marissa scribbled in the chart. "Second shift, signals stronger than before." The air tightened like a drawn string. Every breath seemed held. Daniel straightened, note in hand, staring down the board of doctors. His chest heaved, like a man ready to leap from a bridge, yet already decided. He pressed his lips together, lifted the faded paper, and spoke, his words breaking in the air. "If you force me to choose right now, then I will—" The crowded conference room fell silent as Daniel lifted the faded slip of paper. His voice was hoarse yet steady. "My daughter hasn't let go. This is the proof." In one hand he held the paper. Beside it lay the brainwave report, second shift, signals stronger than before, submitted by Marissa. The two moments lined up with uncanny precision, like fire-branded marks. Dr. Grant folded his arms, shaking his head. "A nameless scrap of paper and a few numbers. And you call that a miracle? This is a hospital, not a theater. Sign the order. Pull the plug. End it." The sound of the file slamming onto the table was heavy and final, like a hammer striking faith. Some doctors nodded in agreement, others lowered their eyes to avoid his gaze. The air strained, ready to snap. Daniel wavered for a heartbeat, sweat soaking through his shirt. Then he lifted his head, eyes blazing. "If it's a signature you want, I'll sign the opposite. I'll sing until my very last breath." At that moment, the large screen linked to the hospital room flickered. The wave patterns spiked hard, the beeping rapid and loud across the room. Every head turned. Marissa shot to her feet, her voice shaking but strong. "This isn't a coincidence. I wrote it down myself. Naomi is responding." She held up her notebook. The words, shaky but sharp, stood out on the page. Second shift, signals stronger than before. The crowd stirred. A few doctors slipped from their seats, unwilling to meet Grant's eyes. Just then, a security officer entered, holding an electronic report. "System log. No visitor signatures recorded for last night, but the cameras captured the hallway lights flickering at the exact moment the clock glowed red. Data confirmed." The room erupted. Chairs scraped back. Voices rose in shock. Grant's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he clutched the file. Daniel pressed his hand against his chest, eyes fixed on the patient's room. "You can deny me, but you cannot deny this truth. Faith is rising again, and this time it will not be silenced." The faded paper trembled in the air vent's breeze, as if ready to ignite into flame. The conference room was still buzzing when the doors burst open. A nurse rushed in, her voice trembling, yet loud as thunder. "Naomi, her hand just moved!" The room exploded in shock. Every eye swung toward the glass window, looking into the patient's room. On the white bed, a tiny hand clenched faintly. Naomi's fingers brushed against her father's, just for a moment, but enough to bring Daniel to tears. He grasped her hand firmly, whispering, lips shaking, "I'm here." That instant was pure gold, beyond anything a machine could measure. Cameras flashed nonstop. Reporters crowded the hallway, capturing every second. On the large screen, Naomi's brainwaves rippled clearly. A record was signed on the spot. First patient movement. Witnessed by all, a milestone no one could erase. Dr. Grant's face turned pale. She sank into her chair, her voice thin and broken. "No, it's only reflex." But her protest vanished under the roar of voices. A board member stood, his tone firm. "We demand an inquiry. You're suspended from duty. Grant froze, her eyes empty of argument. Her vacant chair sat like a shadow left behind in a room now flooded with light. In the hallway, cheers erupted. Parents of young patients came forward, clasping Daniel's hand. You've given us hope. Beside him, Marissa raised the faded slip of paper. The moment the clock flickers, the red light pulses, as photographers snapped away. Flash bulbs lit the worn words, spreading them like sparks rising from ashes. Moments later, the hospital director signed and stamped a short order. Special Care Fund approved. Naomi Reeves, full coverage. The page, smelling of fresh ink, was placed into Daniel's hands like public testimony. He held it tight, tears streaming. Naomi still lay there, but her breathing grew steadier. The late afternoon sun poured through the glass, catching the words, "Don't give up," burning bright in her father's eyes. Daniel leaned down and whispered something only his daughter could hear. Daniel leaned close, whispering in his daughter's ear. Before the words were finished, Naomi's eyelids fluttered and slowly opened. Noon sunlight poured across her lashes. A long breath slipped out, soft as a petal falling onto tile. Months later, at the gates of a new center, a sign gleamed under the golden sun. Dawn Echo. Rows of white lilies lined the walkway, their fragrance gentle and welcoming. Neighbors, nurses, and doctors gathered, their eyes full of the faith they once thought lost. Naomi stood on a small stage, dressed in a simple white dress, curls falling in waves. Her clear voice rose with an old folk tune, its melody echoing the 1970s. It was the same song her father once sang in a night of despair. Now every note soared, bright and strong, a living witness that life had returned. Daniel sat in the front row, clutching the worn notebook, its pages stained with blurred ink. Behind him, a large screen replayed the moment of the first patient movement, witnessed by all, the small hand closing over her father's. Applause thundered, blending with voices outside until it became a sacred chorus. A parent carrying a young child approached, bowing with tears. "You've given us hope." Reporters raised a photograph of the faded slip of paper. The moment the clock flickers, the red light pulses. Don't give up. Now it was framed at the center's entrance, a lamp that would never burn out. Daniel pressed his rough hand to the glass, his eyes glowing with warmth. The community was no longer divided. Grant had been suspended under review. In contrast, Marissa was invited to the stage, where Daniel and Naomi handed her a bouquet of white flowers. Her tearful smile etched itself into memory, proof that justice had sided with truth. The evening light tilted, painting a living picture. A father, his daughter, and a circle of hands joined around them. In the hush that followed, Daniel closed his eyes, breathing in the faint coconut scent that once lingered in his wife's hair, now carried in Naomi's. He whispered, steady and sure, "We've found our way home." Evening settled over the grounds of Dawn Echo. The last rays of sunlight broke across the new glass windows, scattering into shimmering fragments. Amid children's voices rising in song and waves of applause, Daniel sat quietly, his hand resting on the framed slip of paper. The faded words, "The moment the clock flickers, the red light pulses. Don't give up," now stood as a lamp guiding an entire community. Naomi stood in the circle of her friends, her face glowing. She sang the lullaby that once pulled her father back from despair. The notes trembled yet shone, proof that even the smallest faith can call life to return. Daniel lifted his gaze to the sunset sky, his eyes damp yet bright. In his heart, the hollow beeps of yesterday had become the rhythm of hope. He squeezed his daughter's hand and whispered the words that closed their journey. A small faith can change the whole world. And if it were you, facing a faint light in the dark, would you hold on or let go? Join us in spreading hope. Like and subscribe to continue this journey.